Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, and joining me today is a new guest on the podcast. Never had him on the pod, never had him on the Sirius XM show, but he's been talking with Byron behind the scenes about possibly doing some work together. Certainly looking forward to that. His name is Jared Smola. You can find him on Twitter at SmolaDS. He's a fantasy football analyst over there at DraftSharks. Jared, what the hell's going on, brother?
And good to be on. Enjoying the quote unquote off season where things aren't as crazy, but always lots going on in the football world. Looking forward to free agency here, some pro days, and then of course the draft.
Yeah, man. Pro days are going to be interesting too. We were talking before we came on just about you live up there in the Rochester area, close to Bill's camp. As we're starting to kind of map out what's going on with our training camp tour. And certainly now it's just with the pro day tour, we're just having to figure it out and fly by the seats of our pants about who's going to have media availability, who's not going to have it, and everything like that. It's an interesting time for it, but it feels like things are starting to get back on schedule a little bit. And 2021, we're already looking ahead to the season. As a matter of fact, you've already started with some projections. Season-long projections you'll be releasing over there on DraftSharks. We, of course, won't give them all away, but there's certainly some players I'm interested in poking around on here, maybe getting some insight from you as you've gone through your projections to sort of see how we might differ or see eye to eye on some of these guys. Do you mind if I just kind of ask you about a couple of these players, and we'll just kind of start hitting on it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What about James Robinson? What the hell? Whenever we look at the Jaguars, and you have a new coach coming in, you have a new quarterback coming in, and just whenever I think about Urban Meyer and I think about his philosophy, I know that this is not going to be this isn't going to be something that just blows people's hair back and says that's something that I haven't heard, or a narrative I haven't heard, or something I haven't thought about. But it just feels like it's obvious, right? That James Robinson, I'm not sure he's going to be a guy that looks as good standing next to a quarterback that's not under, a quarterback out of shotgun doing zone read stuff. I'm not entirely sure. With that said, he did show a lot last year in the receiving game. He showed a lot in the fact that he can shoulder a load, and he was able to have just ridiculous volume last season. Is basically what he finished as a top 5 or 6 running back is for fantasy purposes last year. When you have a new regime there, you have a new GM, you have a new head coach who's a de facto GM and a complete power hungry power monger. I don't necessarily think that with a new quarterback and Trevor Lawrence and all the rest of this stuff, there's a lot of they have between $60 and $100 million in cap space, depending on what they do. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Could they go out and get another running back? I mean, I guess I would probably make some sense, but I think these guys are starting to realize, man, I got a good running back who's cheap as hell, who has shown that he can do some stuff this next year. I'm just not sure what a price. It's a real tough dichotomy for me to figure out. All right, are they going to be? From what I see, are they going to be smart and say, look, we don't got to pay a running back. We got a good one. He's cheap. Let's run the wheels off him. We showed he was good. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We have more important things to spend the money on. Or are they going to say, look, James Robinson's a power back. He's an I-back runner. He needs a lead blocker ahead of him. That's the kind of way that he is. He can't create on his own. I'm going to be an old football coach mentality, and I'm going to say that we're going to need to get somebody in here that's more that looks better in this type of scheme. What do you think about it, and how do you project him?
Yeah, I think the nice thing with Robinson is Jacksonville is going to tell us how they feel about him. That new regime is going to tell us by the end of the draft. We're going to know. Did they go out and spend money on a high price free agent? Did they spend a day 1 or 2 pick on a running back? So but by May we're going to know. It's tougher if you're drafting, between now and then, figuring out what to do with James Robinson. He was fine last year. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, he was good. He didn't blow the doors off. Like you said, though, he proved capable of handling a big workload. In fantasy football, it's all about volume. So if he's going to get that volume again in what really should be a better offense with Trevor Lawrence there, with the receivers they have there, like if he's the guy there, if they don't go add serious competition for him over the next couple months, he is an RB1. I think you have to bake in some risk if you're drafting now. For me, he'd be in the higher end RB2 range, someone I'd consider in like the third or fourth round of fantasy drafts.
All right. Well, but what about, do you have a projection on him? Like if you're projecting him right now, do you project him? Are you projecting in more of a workload split? Are you saying he's going to be 75% of what he was last year, 50%, 100%? Like how are you forecasting it right now? If you're looking at best ball leagues, how does that process work?
Yeah, so I just pulled up my numbers on him. I have him for 227 carries for 990 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I definitely, and I have him for 45 catches. So I baked in, doing projections in early March is super tough. You have to, projections are always,
oh yeah,
they're hard. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray area, and when you're doing them in March before free agency and the draft, there's even more gray area that we have to work around. So I definitely baked in some chance of Jacksonville adding someone who's going to take touches from him. If that doesn't happen by the end of the draft, then these projections are going to shoot way up. I'll have him well above 250 carries.
So I just wanted to clarify from earlier. I said that James Robinson was a top 5 or 6 in PPR. He was actually running back 7 on a per game basis last year. So so really, really good. If we can get 70, I think what I'm thinking of that can make me a little bit bullish on James Robinson is if we can, he's falling in, like, I know we're talking best ball, but in dynasty startup drafts, he's falling to the 5th round because people are just sure that they're going to move on from him just because he's an undrafted free agent. I keep thinking to myself, well, shit. I mean, do you depend more on that, or do you depend more on the fact that he's actually shown it on an NFL field that he's cheap as hell? If they're sharp, they'll at least see what they have in the guy. What about how about this? Just maybe a few more running backs. What about Myles Gaskin? What are you doing with this guy? I mean, I was having an argument with one of our guys, Alan Seslowski, earlier today about he needs to get him down in the dynasty rankings, is what I was telling him, just because of all this news that we're getting that Miami is almost certainly going to address the running back position. Are you high on it? It doesn't seem like you're that high on Myles Gaskin either.
No, and I mean he's a similar guy to James Robinson in that he wasn't highly regarded coming into the league. Miami did not spend Gaskin was a 7th rounder, was he? Yeah. I believe
either 6th or 7th. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I mean Miami has so much draft ammo. They have the cap space. I think Miami is more likely to add someone to come in and take Gaskin's job than Jacksonville is. Gaskin's significantly cheaper if you're hopping into any of these drafts right now. You can get him in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, and in that case, I mean, maybe it's worth the gamble because if Miami doesn't add a rookie or a free agent, if they add a rookie and that guy just doesn't fire early, and Gaskin opens the season as a lead back, there's some upside there. But I would, if I'm betting, I would say Gaskin is not the Dolphins' lead back in 2021 here.
I'm looking at the best ball cheat sheet over at rosterwatch.com, and I actually just made a change on this thing as we're talking with Myles. I moved Myles Gaskin down. Would you rather have Chase Edmonds?
Yes.
With the fact that Kenyon. Well, what is it about it? Is it just because you think Drake might be gone, and we've seen in small samples what he can do? It's a better offense, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. I think Edmonds has a better chance to be his team's lead back than Gaskin does, even though I wouldn't be surprised if Drake comes back to Arizona because he had a pretty disappointing season. I'm not sure how much love there's going to be. Yeah, I'm not sure there's going to be much love for him. So he might just end up re-signing with the Cardinals on a cheap 1 or 2 year deal. Or maybe Arizona just says, we're kind of done with you. We're going to hand it over to Edmonds, see what he does.
It's going to have to be a cheap deal. I mean, the fucking salary cap went down. Like this isn't going to be if he does. I think that a lot of these free agents, man, something to keep in mind is a lot of these free agents, if they do want to get their big deal, especially the position like running back or something, we're going to see a lot of these guys have to take 1 year kind of cheap deals to get, to get back going next year. Some more guys here. And how much have you watched the rookies at all? Have you watched them at all? Have you watched Najee Harris and Travis Etienne at least as far as those two guys?
I mean, I've watched a ton of Alabama and Clemson games just on TV over the past couple of years. So I've seen a bunch of them, but I'm not going to start digging into the rookies until next week. Actually, when I get these all these projections done.
Well, just is there a point in these drafts whenever you would say like now I'm here at James Robinson or I'm here at Miles Sanders or maybe David Montgomery or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where you would say, you know what, man. if I'm playing in best ball 10s where the rookie class is available to me, I'm just going to go with Najee Harris here, or just go with Travis Etienne. Is there, like, whenever you're doing your projections, is there a spot wherever you can kind of identify where maybe you can say one of these newcomers is probably going to come into a better projection than this, even though I don't know exactly where he's going yet?
Yeah, so I've actually done a handful of drafts already at FFPC. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them over there. Right. They have the best ball drafts up and running. So the rookie backs, Harris and Etienne, tend to go. You could see him slip into the early third round. I think usually they're going in the fourth. Sometimes they'll fall to the fifth. That feels about right to me. I think both those guys are locks to be top 50 picks.
Oh yeah,
probably top 40 picks. That fact alone makes them pretty safe bets to get volume right out of the gate. Rarely do you see teams spend that type of capital on a running back and not sort of make them the guy right out of the gate. I think Harris and Etienne are both talented enough to be productive right away at the NFL level. Javonte Williams is the guy that's more interesting because I know a lot of folks have him sort of in that same tier as Harris and Etienne. I think, the general public might not see that yet. So Javonte Williams, he goes in the fifth or sixth round of these drafts right now. He's probably the best value among the rookie backs right now.
Right, because with Najee Harris, you're going to have to forego, like I said, a James Robinson, a Miles Sanders, maybe a Joe. People are going to be low on Joe Mixon this year.
I love Mixon.
Do you like him?
I do.
Is it just because we bake in the fact that they're going to have Jonah Williams with another year. He'll be healthy. They're probably going to draft Penei Sewell just to protect Joe Burrow. I worry a little bit about Joe Burrow being back on time and if that's going to affect the entire offense. But talk about Mixon. Are you higher on him than consensus?
I am. I really have been since he came into the league. I think he's like a top 5 talent at running back when he's healthy. I know things have just gotten in the way for him almost every season. Like either the Bengals suck or he's hurt or, whatever it's been. He just hasn't put it all together yet though. I think he has, a top 5 fantasy season in him. He got awesome volume last season before he got hurt. Now he was averaging like 20 carries and 4 or 5 targets per game. The Burrow injury is a concern, but if he's healthy, that offense, there's no reason it shouldn't take another step forward this season. So you're talking about a guy who's going to get, 300 plus touches on a pretty solid offense. I think Mixon is still a top 12 fantasy back to me.
Do you prefer him to J.K. Dobbins in the same division?
I do. Strictly talking fantasy, Dobbins is someone I'm going to be lower than consensus on, which I hate because I love the player. The situation is good in that you have a run heavy offense and a great running game. I don't see any reason to think that Dobbins is going to get the passing game volume that he needs to be, even like a top 15 running back. Lamar Jackson just doesn't throw to his running backs. And that's been the case for the past couple of years now. And we'll see what happens with Gus Edwards. Like, I think Greg Roman prefers, some form of committee backfield where you have 2 guys involved. So I just don't think Dobbins is going to get the volume to, pay off where he's going in these drafts right now.
We go to those Baltimore Ravens training camps ever since Ozzie Newsome left. I'm not getting my people mixed up. Ever since Ozzie left, they've opened it up to the SiriusXM fantasy. They used to not allow it because it was fantasy. It was like the only team that didn't, but they've been super cool recently. And we've always said, man, leaving there, like it's a weird feeling you get that they really value Gus Edwards. They talk about him like he's a really, really good football player. I guess he kind of is a pretty good football player. But I think it's interesting what you were saying about Javonte Williams, because we mentioned the J.K. Dobbins, the Joe Mixons. You're going to have to forego one of the opportunity cost to taking a Najee Harris is going to be more along the lines of one of those guys at the top end, maybe on the bottom end, a guy like David Montgomery or Clyde Edwards-Helaire are the kinds of guys you're going to be foregoing. Whereas in the wide receivers you're going to be foregoing as well are going to be like the Keenan Allens or maybe, a season long an A.J. Brown or, an Allen Robinson when people are worried about where he might go next year. Mm-hmm. Whereas, if you're going to be taking a Javonte Williams, it's like you're taking him over like Chris Carson or Melvin Gordon or, wide receivers that have kind of question marks like Will Fuller or Tyler Lockett or these kinds of guys. Javonte Williams, the way I have him slotted on the cheat sheet, it's like I feel like you can probably get him pretty safely based on what I've done. It's probably around pick 53 to 58 if it's a non-tight end premium. I know that the FFPC ones you've been playing in are tight end premium, so it could be a little bit different than that. But that to me feels I think I'm with you. I think that feels a little bit more safe to take a guy like that in the more like the kind of 5th round than have to take a guy like Najee Harris like into the 3rd or even middle 3rd, really.
Yeah.
What?
It's crazy too. You get into these drafts, man. By the end of the 4th round, it's really that Montgomery, Najee Harris, ETN kind of tier. Once those guys are gone, man, the running back is just there's nothing to get excited about. So it's really Javonte Williams, and for me, you mentioned him. I think Melvin Gordon, where he's going, and he's like a 6th or 7th rounder. I know he's not exciting.
Yeah,
you look at his contract. He's locked in as Denver's lead guy. We'll see if Philip Lindsay comes back. Even if he does, Gordon's going to lead the way as he did last year. Again, he's not sexy, but as a 6th or 7th round pick, Gordon's going to give you a pretty nice like RB2 floor, especially in these best ball drafts. So just, get you 12 to 15 points a week.
I mean, you say it falls off after those guys, and it really does. Let me ask you. I'll name some names. You stop me when you tell me a guy that you're like, I wouldn't mind that guy as a flex in a league where let's say where I start 2 running backs and I got a flex that's going to be my normal flex every week. What about Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Raheem Mostert, James Conner, Damian Harris, Chase Edmonds? What about probably AJ? What about AJ Dillon? He'll be gone like before then. What do you think, AJ Dillon? Are you buying the hype? People are talking about him like he's going to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick once this thing's all said and done. If Aaron Jones leaves, do you think that's the case?
That'd be too rich for me, just because we have no idea what he can do in the passing game. He barely did anything in the passing game at Boston College, and I would if Green Bay loses Aaron Jones, I would think they re-sign Jamal Williams. And he'd be the pat. He's the guy that's interesting. You can get him in the double-digit rounds. If he comes back to Green Bay and Jones is gone, you could see Williams catch like 50+ balls. Because again, I don't think Dillon's going to do that. But I do think Dillon will be the lead, ball carrying back there if Jones leaves. So he'd be like a 3rd or 4th rounder for me at best. That one guy you mentioned in that list, Raheem Moster, and I'll throw Jeff Wilson in there too. I think Shanahan might just ride with those 2 guys in that backfield this coming season. And we know that's a super productive running game. Both those guys have flashed. Mostert really has been good every time he's got a chance with the Niners. And Jeff Wilson was good down the stretch last season. So those are 2 guys I like taking shots on, in the 7th, 8th, 9th round of these drafts.
Whenever you're doing your projections, you said you're from Rochester, New York, which I believe, the craziest fucking thing about New York, man. I look at a map. My daughter's 6 years old, and she loves maps, and she loves like learning the states and stuff like that. And we do a New York map, and it's wild how much of a fucking state you guys got outside of the little part of the little part in NYC that we all know so well. It's a whole state that goes off to the west and up to the north and stuff. And so and that's where Buffalo is. You're kind of up by that area. Is Rochester the capital of New York, or no? That's Albany. Albany.
That's Albany. Yeah.
Anyway, you're close to Buffalo.
Rochester's between Buffalo and Syracuse, right on Lake Ontario there. So we get pounded with the lake effects now.
I'm sure it's beautiful in the summertime though, huh?
Yeah, for like 3 months.
Right. All right. That's all prelude to saying you live near the Bills. What are you a Bills fan?
Doing fantasy football, man, it's hard to be a fan.
Well, did you grow up a Bills fan? Did you grow up?
I mean, my wife's a big Bills fan, so if they win, she's happy, I'm happy.
All right. So how did you project Zach Moss and Devin Singletary? They're split coming up this year. I mean, is there any value to be had in this running game at all when they throw the damn football on every play?
Can they really throw it as much this year as they did last year? I got to think they run it a bit more. And I also you had Josh Allen accounted for such a massive percentage of that team's touchdowns. I think some more scores will go the running backs' way. I think Buffalo's almost kind of done with Devin Singletary already. I mean, he was losing time to TJ Yeldon late in the season, when Zach Moss was hurt. So I kind of think Moss is going to get a shot to, not be a feature workhorse back, but to be maybe 2/3 of that backfield. He's super cheap in drafts. He's available in the double-digit rounds a lot of times. It's a good offense. I mean, it would not be surprising if we're sitting here next year and Zach Moss scored 8, 9, 10 touchdowns, just being the lead back on a solid offense.
That'd be something else.
He's someone that's definitely worth taking a shot on.
What about just all right? One more running back question. I want to ask you a couple of things about receivers. I'm mindful of your time and don't want to harp on it too long. But like, was there anything? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here. If you don't have a good answer, it's fine. But is there anything as you were doing the running back projections that's kind of stood out to you and you kind of said, "Damn, man! Like I wasn't expecting that to be that high or that to be that low or anything like that."
Yeah, a couple. I mean, one of them, again, is Melvin Gordon. I just think for where he's going in drafts, he has such a safe workload. I think you look in Detroit, and I know not a lot of people want to invest in the Lions offense right now, and I get it, but I mean, DeAndre Swift could be in for huge volume. I think he's kind of locked into a big role in the passing game. Like I have him projected for over 60 catches, and we'll see. We'll see if they bring back Adrian Peterson or what they do in the backfield. But I don't know. He could get 250 carries too, and if that's the case, he's a fantasy monster.
And you know that Dan Campbell's such a caveman too. He just wants to run the shit out of the football, right?
Yeah, so. for sure.
All right. What about wide receivers here? Do you think that I look and see, and maybe I'm just a sucker, and whenever I see Julio Jones going as like a middling wide receiver 2, I just start to think like, Jesus, man, like how am I going to pass on this dude in the 4th or 5th round of my draft? What do you think about the Atlanta guys? Clearly, you got to rank Calvin Ridley ahead of Julio at this point, but what do you think of that dichotomy?
So a couple of general thoughts on Atlanta. One, I love the Arthur Smith hire. I love what he did with that Titans offense. So it's an offense I am high on, one I want to invest in. My question is, are they going to draft a quarterback at 4? Because if they do that, it adds a lot more unknown. Now, the guy they draft, if it's, Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, I think the offense will be fine under those guys. Who knows when that guy takes over for Matt Ryan. So there is some question for me with that passing game. But, yeah, you said it with Julio Jones, man. If you can get him in like the 4th round, he's going to miss games, but he was still a top 10 receiver when he was healthy last season. He was still top 5 in the NFL in yards per route run. Like he's still an elite receiver when he's healthy. I think that injury risk is more than baked into that, 3rd, 4th round price tags. I mean, he's definitely someone I'm interested in these early drafts.
What about going a little bit later than Julio? Do you have a preference between the 2 second-year guys that are going fairly close to one another, CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk? Do you have a feel between those guys about which way you would lean if you're having to draft now? And let's just say, not for dynasty, but just for a season-long best ball aspect.
Yeah, so my gut tells me CeeDee Lamb. I'm pulling up my projections, though, to see who I actually have higher. I have Lamb for about 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. I have Brandon Ayuk for 930 yards and 6 scores. So, my numbers say CeeDee Lamb, which, again, is kind of what my gut was telling me. I still think he's the better wide receiver, and I think he's in really a much better, more voluminous, more efficient passing game there in Dallas. So it'd be Lamb for me there.
If you're having to choose now before we get to free agency or before we know what happened with these 2 players, would you prefer to take a gamble on Will Fuller, or who we know will miss 1 game next season, but who has the chance to, if he's not with Deshaun Watson, who he was a monster with last year. Now, will he stay a monster when he's not on steroids? I don't know. When you have him, and then you have also maybe a chance, like there's been this creeping talk of him ending up in Green Bay that always just kind of keeps me a little bit keeps me a little bit on board with my continued interest in Will Fuller. I was glad I was so interested in him last year. It paid off last year, even though it was frustrating to end the season. And then I look at Kenny Golladay, and these guys are going pretty close to one another right now. Sometimes they're right next to one another in the draft queue, and it's a pretty tough binary choice for me because Kenny Golladay, we don't know where he's going to be. If he's, I guess they could maybe franchise him, but if they do, he's stuck up there with Jared Goff, who's shitty. What are your thoughts on those 2 guys? I find it to be a pretty tough decision.
Yeah, I've heard the franchise tag talk for Galladay too. I've heard they could franchise tag him and then trade him. I think staying in Detroit wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because it's not going to be a great offense. Yeah, Goff has his issues, but man, Galladay would see a ton of targets if he stays in Detroit. And assuming Marvin Jones
because Jones is out, right?
Yeah, it'd be Galladay and Hawkinson there and Swift, I guess. So I would lean towards Galladay among those two, potential free agents. I think he's a slightly better talent. He has, less injury concern, even though he did miss a bunch of time this past season. And as you mentioned, he doesn't have that, 1-game suspension to open the season.
Are you in on, I know I talked about him earlier, but we talked about this team earlier, but another second-year guy. Are you in on Laviska Shenault in Urban Meyer's offense? Oh yeah,
definitely.
just drop.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, everyone, Chark goes ahead of Shenault in basically all these drafts. I prefer Shenault. What he did as a rookie in that anemic offense was pretty impressive. He has that rushing upside, which is so huge. Like, I think about Robert Woods. Like, people underrate Robert Woods every year because he runs for like 200 yards and 2 scores every year. And people don't, factor that into his value. I think Chenault's going to be similar. So even if Shenault and Chark post similar receiving numbers, I think, Chenault's going to outscore him in fantasy because of some of that rushing stuff he can do.
I'm just kind of looking here at a guy sort of that I had trouble kind of ranking above Laviska Shenault. Maybe what about Juju? Do you have any ideas on him? Is it just hard because we don't know where he's going to end up? And do you have maybe a landing spot for him that you would like?
No landing spot off the top of my head. He's such a tough guy to evaluate. Like what he did as a rookie and into his second season, just super impressive. It was alongside Antonio Brown though, and since Brown has left, Juju hasn't been the same guy. And I know that was largely 2 years ago because of the crappy quarterback play in Pittsburgh. But even last year, Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson were just better. They're more efficient, more yards per route run than Juju Smith-Schuster. So he's I'm curious to see how the league values him, how big a deal he gets, and of course where he lands. He's a guy I've just been staying away from in these early drafts just because I have a lot of question marks about him.
That's fair enough. I have some question marks myself about just transitioning to a couple of tight end questions here before I get you out, Jared. Once again, Jared Smola from DraftSharks. Why don't you tell them before I ask these 2 tight end questions, tell the people where they can find you once again, tell them where they can find you on Twitter, and what you have going on. You said you have some things coming up over on DraftSharks just this week.
Yeah, it's at Smola DS on Twitter. And then, DraftSharks, we're going to have our full 2021 projections up next week. We'll have our MVP board up, which is, basically your customized cheat sheet, sort of your drafting tool. That'll be loaded with all the projections. So if you're hopping in any of these, early drafts, whether it's on FFPC or elsewhere, I think it's going to be a big advantage to have that stuff. And then also starting next week, we're going to have our rookie profile series kicking off. We're going to have in-depth breakdowns on 30 to 40 of the rookies here before the draft, so you can sort of get a lay of the land. Fair enough. All right, sounds good, man. What I'm not sure about is Darren Waller. I don't know if he can continue this. Yeah. I mean, is he overvalued right now? I mean, if you're having to look at taking Darren Waller and I've seen him go with the 3-4 turn in some of these, and in the FFPC, I'm sure he's going even higher than that. He's going in the end of the first round in FFPC drafts. I can't pull the trigger there. I tweeted something out this morning basically saying I'm still taking George Kittle over Darren Waller, and it kind of blew up. And I think there's definitely more Waller fans out there, versus Kittle, and the ADP will tell you that Waller is going ahead of Kittle. I think Waller he's an awesome fantasy tight end because he's basically a jacked up wide receiver that we get to play at tight end. I think he definitely belongs third, but I'm still taking George Kittle. I mean, George Kittle has led all tight ends in yards per route run in each of the last 3 seasons. And I know there's some injury risk there, but I mean, at this time a year ago, people were debating George Kittle versus Travis Kelce. Kelce was obviously the answer there, but to me, Kittle's still the clear-cut number 2 tight end in fantasy. I mean, it's not even a question for me. And honestly, if I was in a dynasty league, I might want Kittle more just because he's young. He's younger. Yep. I mean, Kelce is Kelce 32? I think he's 31. Even Waller is pretty old. He obviously bounced around. He had
Travis Kelce was born in '89, so he will turn 32 during the season, whereas Kittle's going to turn 28 during this next season. So Kittle a little bit older than I thought. I thought he's more like 20. I kind of thought he was more like 26 or 27. 28. Regardless, I do agree with you. I do prefer George Kittle to Darren Waller in basically all formats. And if I was a real NFL team, I would prefer him just for his blocking and everything he brings in that area. What about Tyler Higby? You went on Tyler Higby. No Gerald Everett, maybe no Josh Reynolds. Matt Stafford is a much better quarterback. We saw Tyler Higby from the end of 2019 look like a coming of Rob Gronkowski. Can he get back to maybe 75% of that, you think?
Yeah, I mean, he showed us the ceiling, so that's always exciting. He's cheaper now than he was in fantasy drafts last year, and people were excited about much. I still can't believe he did what he did down the stretch in 2019, and then he just sort of went back to like a bit player in that offense.
I thought the genie was out of the bottle. I'm like, what the hell? I mean, how they go back to this guy? Yeah, and
they gave him a pretty nice contract. You know, I think it might have been prior to the start of 2019. Even though he's making a pretty penny there, and you know, like you said, Gerald Everett, a free agent. I don't expect him to be back. So I think this is the year to buy in on Higby, where sort of everyone's cooled on him after a disappointing 2020.
I totally agree. He's a guy who I'm getting more and more interested in. Is there, besides him, one last thing, any tight ends as you've done your projections that you say, man, like as far as the projection I see on this guy, he's just going too late, he's going too early. What do you think?
Yeah, one guy that sticks out to me is Hayden Hurst. Again, mentioned Arthur Smith. You know, he obviously a former tight ends coach. He got nice production out of the tight end position in Tennessee. It was frustrating sometimes because we always wanted it to be Jonnu Smith, and it would be Anthony Firkser and McCall Pruitt. I'm excited. I'm interested to see what else Atlanta adds to the tight end room. If they add another guy who could, kind of vulture Hayden Hurst, I'll have to tap the brakes a little bit. But for now, I think Hayden Hurst, he's a guy Atlanta spent quite a bit on to acquire last offseason. I think had more hype going into last year. He was decent last year, but again, I think Arthur Smith could sort of unlock Hayden Hurst this season.